The first sign that something was wrong came on a Monday morning when I pulled into the parking lot and saw two of our regional managers standing outside the building, staring at their phones instead of being at their desks running the 6 a.m. dispatch cycle. In 14 years of running the systems that keep Meridian Freight Solutions moving, I had never seen those two standing still before sunrise. They get paid to move freight, and freight doesn't wait for anyone. My name is Marcus Webb, and I am 52 years old. For the past 14 years, I have been the Senior Systems Administrator at Meridian Freight Solutions, a regional trucking company operating out of Atlanta with terminals in Charlotte, Nashville, Birmingham, and Jacksonville. We run approximately 800 trucks and employ just over 2,000 drivers across 7 southeastern states. Those drivers haul everything from medical supplies to automobile parts to refrigerated food products for grocery chains. When our system works, freight moves. When freight moves, drivers get paid. When drivers get paid on time, they show up. It is that simple, and it is that fragile. The platform I manage is not something you buy off a shelf. It is a custom-built dispatch and driver management system that I have spent 14 years building on top of a legacy codebase, patching together with integrations I wrote myself, and tuning to handle everything the real world throws at a trucking operation. It handles DOT hours of service compliance tracking for every driver across 7 states, which sounds straightforward until you realize that a driver who starts his shift in Georgia, picks up a load in Tennessee, and delivers in North Carolina has logged regulated hours under federal rules that interact differently with each state's weigh station requirements. It handles international fuel tax agreement calculations, which require us to track every gallon of fuel purchased and every mile driven in each state so we can file accurate quarterly reports with 7 different state agencies. Get that wrong, and you do not just owe back taxes. You get audited, fined, and in serious cases, you lose operating authority. The platform also manages driver pay, which in trucking is never simple. Drivers earn per-mile rates that change based on load type, hazmat endorsement requirements, refrigerated equipment premiums, detention pay when shippers hold them at a dock past 2 hours, layover pay when they are forced to sit overnight waiting on a load, and fuel performance bonuses tied to their individual miles per gallon data pulled from the trucks themselves. I want to make something clear before I go further, because I have watched enough of these stories end with someone in the comments pointing out that any good systems administrator documents everything and trains a backup. I have that answer ready. 3 years ago, I submitted a formal proposal to management requesting budget for a junior administrator and a structured knowledge transfer program. The response from the director of operations at the time was that the budget did not support a redundant headcount. I was told my institutional knowledge was a competitive advantage and that the company valued experienced personnel. That is a very polite way of saying they were too cheap to protect themselves from the exact situation they were about to create. I want you to remember that part. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Wednesday afternoon in early October. Gary Hollister, who had purchased Meridian Freight Solutions 8 months earlier from the original founding family, called me into the main conference room along with Karen Frost, our director of operations, and a young man I had never seen before. Gary was the kind of owner who dressed like he was always about to go on a golf course, spoke in short declarative sentences, and had the particular habit of nodding slowly while you were talking in a way that made it obvious he had stopped listening 30 seconds ago. He had made his money in commercial real estate and had bought Meridian as what he described in his introductory remarks to all staff as a growth investment in the logistics space. The young man sitting next to Gary was introduced as his son, Tyler. Tyler Hollister was 26 years old, wearing the kind of expensive sneakers that cost more than most of our drivers clear in a week, and carrying a laptop that he set on the conference room table with the careful ceremony of someone placing an artifact in a museum. He had attended 2 semesters of a computer science program before leaving to complete an online coding boot camp, and in the past 18 months had built, as Gary described it with genuine paternal pride, several successful applications. I would later learn that these applications included a workout tracking app that had approximately 400 users and a neighborhood event notification tool for the gated community where Gary lived. "Marcus," Gary said, "we are moving forward with a technology modernization initiative. Tyler has built a new operations platform that is going to replace your current system. It is cloud native, it is mobile first, and it is going to cut our operational technology costs by about 40%. I looked at Karen, who was studying the table in front of her with the focused concentration of someone trying to become invisible. Can you walk me through what the new platform covers? I asked. Tyler opened his laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed a clean, well-designed interface. Bright colors, large buttons, a dashboard with charts that updated in real time on what appeared to be demo data. It looked exactly like every technology presentation I had ever seen from someone who had never operated a system like ours in a real environment. It handles dispatch assignment, driver tracking, load status, and pay calculations, Tyler said. Everything your current system does, but with a modern interface that drivers can access from their phones. No more logging into that clunky portal. I pointed at the screen. What is the data source for your HOS compliance module? Tyler blinked. HOS? Hours of service. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Our drivers are legally prohibited from driving more than 11 hours in a 14-hour window after 10 consecutive hours off duty. If we dispatch a driver who is out of hours, that is a DOT violation. Accumulate enough of those and we lose operating authority in the affected state. Right, Tyler said. We pull the ELD data from the trucks. Through what integration? He glanced at his father. We connect to the standard API. Which ELD vendor? We use 3 different electronic logging device manufacturers across our fleet because of acquisitions over the years. Each one has a different API structure and different data refresh rates. Tyler began typing something. We can integrate with all of them. There is a word for what I felt at that moment, and it is not a word I would use in polite company. I have spent 14 years watching vendors walk into conference rooms with polished presentations and walk out having promised things their platforms could not deliver for the actual complexity of our operation. Tyler was not even a vendor with a real product. He was a 26-year-old who had built a workout tracker, sitting in a conference room telling me that he was going to replace a system that processes payroll for 2,000 drivers every 2 weeks and keeps our operating authority intact across 7 state regulatory frameworks. I tried. I explained IFTA. I explained the detention pay calculation logic that has to account for time-stamped geofence entries at shipper and receiver locations, cross-referenced against appointment times in our load management module, with different grace periods written into each customer's contract. I explained that we have 41 different pay rate codes in our driver compensation structure, and that some of those codes have conditional rules that change based on the length of haul, the load type, and whether the driver was dispatched from their home terminal or from a remote location. Tyler nodded along with the same expression his father had used in our previous meetings. The expression that meant, I hear sounds coming from your direction. We have accounted for the complexity, Gary said. Tyler has been studying your processes for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I had spent 14 years building institutional knowledge around those processes, and Gary thought 2 weeks of studying was equivalent. When do you want to make the switch? I asked. Next pay cycle, Gary said. 2 weeks from Friday. I want to say something important here that I did not say in that conference room because I want to be honest with you about my own thinking in that moment. I did not argue harder than I should have. I had watched this movie at a previous company, and I had learned something from watching it. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is clearly state the risks, make sure those risks are on the record, and then let the lesson teach itself. I told Gary that I would prepare full documentation of our current system processes. I told Tyler that I was available for any technical questions during the transition. I told Karen privately, in the hallway afterward, that she should make sure she had Gary's signature on something authorizing the go-live date, because when this went sideways, she was going to need documentation that the decision had not been hers. Karen looked at me with the expression of someone watching a slow-moving flood from a second-floor window. She knew exactly what I was saying. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Tyler shadowed me for 3 days, asking questions that told me he understood the surface of what I was describing, but not the depth. He would hear me explain the detention pay calculation and say, yeah, okay, timestamp minus appointment time. That is easy math. He did not understand that the appointment time in our system sometimes gets overridden by a broker note that comes in through a separate EDI feed, or that certain high-volume customers have negotiated rates where detention does not start until 4 hours instead of 2, and those customer-specific rules live in a configuration table that has to be manually maintained when contracts change. I documented everything I could. I wrote 340 pages of process documentation over those 2 weeks. I want to be clear about that number because I have seen the comments on videos like this one, and yes, I documented obsessively. What I could not document was the judgment. I could not write down the instinct that tells you when a driver's HOS data looks wrong because the GPS coordinates suggest he was in a location where the cell signal is known to be unreliable and his ELD may have time-stamped incorrectly. I could not document the institutional memory of which shippers in our network consistently enter the wrong appointment times in their portal versus which ones are reliably accurate. That kind of knowledge lives in 14 years of pattern recognition, and there is no template for it. The go-live was on a Thursday. Tyler had been working late in the server room the previous 2 nights, migrating data into his platform. I stopped by on Wednesday evening and found him running data imports from our legacy system, and I noticed immediately that the driver pay codes were not mapping correctly. In our system, pay code 14 is the hazmat endorsement premium. In his import schema, he had mapped it to field 14 inches, a sequential list, which happened to be our refrigerated equipment premium. Those are 2 entirely different pay rates, with entirely different tax implications. Tyler, I said, you have your pay code mapping inverted for at least 2 of your rate codes. He stared at the screen. It looks right to me. Pay code 14 inches, our legacy system is hazmat endorsement premium. You have it mapped to refrigerated equipment premium. He pulled up his mapping table and scrolled through it. After a moment he said, I see it. I will fix it tonight. I pointed at 3 other fields and explained the issues. He typed notes. I left, because I had done what I could do. The first call came at 7:18 inches the morning on the Friday after Go Live. It was from Dennis Pruitt, a driver out of our Charlotte terminal who had been with Meridian for 11 years. Marcus, Dennis said, my pay stub shows I made $63,000 last week. I wish that was true, man, but my wife is already calling the bank because she thinks it is a mistake. I was still in my truck in my driveway. I pulled my laptop out and connected to the system remotely. What I saw told me everything I needed to know. Tyler's data migration had not just inverted 2 pay codes. It had created a cascading error throughout the entire pay calculation engine because his platform was applying rate multipliers using driver ID numbers rather than rate code values. Drivers with higher employee ID numbers were showing enormous pay figures. Drivers with lower ID numbers were showing near 0 or negative values. I called Karen. She answered on the first ring, which told me she had already been hearing from people. How bad? I asked. The pay file is wrong for approximately 1,100 drivers, she said. Her voice had that compressed quality of someone maintaining professional calm through considerable effort. The direct deposit batch is processing right now. The bank's automated system is flagging transactions because some amounts are outside normal parameters, but it is still pushing some of them through. Pull the batch, I said. We are trying. The authorization protocol in Tyler's system requires his credentials to halt a batch in progress, and he is not answering his phone. That was the first moment I felt something that was not quite satisfaction but was adjacent to it. Not because people were being hurt, that part genuinely bothered me, but because the specific shape of the disaster was exactly what I had described in that conference room 3 weeks earlier. By 9 a.m., the situation had expanded significantly. The HOS compliance module in Tyler's platform had stopped syncing with one of our 3 ELD vendors entirely, which meant we had approximately 230 drivers whose hours of service data was not updating. Under DOT regulations, dispatching a driver whose HOS status is unknown is itself a violation. Our dispatchers, doing exactly what they were trained to do, had halted dispatch for any driver whose HOS status showed as pending in the new system, which meant roughly 30% of our active fleet was sitting at truck stops and rest areas waiting for a status that was not coming. The IFTA calculation module had produced numbers that, as our compliance manager described it to me on the phone, appeared to have been generated by someone who had confused miles with kilometers and then multiplied by the fuel price instead of dividing by the fuel economy. We had 3 state agencies that we were obligated to file quarterly reports with at the end of that month, and the numbers our new system was producing would trigger audits in all 3. My phone kept ringing. Drivers, dispatchers, terminal managers. One driver out of our Birmingham terminal sent me a screenshot of his pay stub showing that he owed the company $1,100 for the previous pay period due to something the system was calling a negative performance adjustment, which was not a pay code that existed anywhere in our system and appeared to have been generated by a formula error in Tyler's rate calculation engine. The call from Karen came at 11:30. Gary wants to know what it will take to get you back in and fix this. I was sitting on my back porch by that point, watching my neighbor's dog chase squirrels and thinking about nothing in particular. I am going to need some time to think about my terms, I said. Marcus, we have DOT exposure on 230 drivers right now, and the pay situation is... I understand the situation, Karen. I built the system that your current situation is demonstrating the necessity of. Give me an hour. I want to be honest about the next hour because I have seen some of these stories end with the narrator claiming they had no satisfaction in what they were about to do. That is not entirely true for me. I had spent 14 years building something that worked. I had been told that my institutional knowledge was a competitive advantage and then been walked to the door so that a 26-year-old with a laptop and a powerful father could try to replace it with something he had, built in a few months. I had been told no when I requested resources to train a backup. I had documented everything I possibly could and been ignored on the critical technical details. So yes, when I sat down to write my terms, I felt something. I would be lying if I said otherwise. I called Karen back at 12:45. Here is what I need, I said. First, $6,500 as an immediate consulting engagement fee, wired to my account before I set foot in that building. Second, a written contract at 1.5 times my previous salary for a 2-year term, with a buyout clause if they try to terminate early. Third, Tyler is removed from any systems-related responsibilities immediately and permanently. Fourth, I get a formal written authorization to hire 2 junior administrators and run a proper knowledge transfer program this time. And fifth, Gary sends a company-wide communication acknowledging that the payroll and compliance issues were the result of an inadequate technology implementation and that the situation has been remediated. Silence on the line. That last one is going to be a hard sell, Karen said. I know, which is why I am asking for it. Another silence. Let me call you back. She called back in 20 minutes, agreed to all of it. I drove back to the Meridian Freight Solutions building on a Saturday morning, and I want to tell you something about how it felt to walk back through that door. The dispatchers on the weekend crew started clapping when I came through the security entrance. Not sarcastically, not as a joke. They started clapping because their system had been broken for 36 hours, and the people whose paychecks depended on them doing their jobs correctly had been waiting for someone who actually understood what was broken. I spent the next 19 hours in the server room. The first 6 hours were purely diagnostic, mapping the full extent of what Tyler's migration had done to the data. It was not just the pay code mapping issue I had caught on Wednesday night. The migration had also overwritten 3 years of historical HOS data in a way that made our compliance records look like they had been maintained by someone randomly entering numbers. The IFTA records for the previous quarter were corrupted beyond use, which meant I was going to have to rebuild them from the raw GPS and fuel purchase data stored in our backup systems. I had set those backup systems up 4 years earlier on my own initiative, storing raw transactional data in a separate archive that I had specifically designed to be isolated from the main platform so that nothing touching the operational system could corrupt it. Tyler had not known those backup systems existed. Gary had not known they existed. Karen had not known they existed. Those systems were the reason I was able to rebuild everything. There is a particular kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from being the person in the room who, years before anyone needed it, built the thing that saves everything. I do not want to be falsely humble about that. That archive was 14 years of professional judgment applied consistently. And on that Saturday night, it was the difference between a painful but fixable situation and an unrecoverable catastrophe. By Sunday morning, I had a clean pay file rebuilt from the original time and GPS data, validated against each driver's actual HOS records. Pay code mapping was corrected. All 1,100 affected drivers would receive accurate payments. I had also generated a corrected IFTA calculation set for the previous quarter that I could submit with an explanatory cover letter to the state agencies involved, which in my experience is usually enough to prevent formal audit proceedings if you get there first. The HOS compliance sync issue with the third-party ELD vendor turned out to be something Tyler had broken by using a deprecated API endpoint that the vendor had officially retired 8 months earlier, but was still technically responding to, just with stale data. I switched it back to the current endpoint, and all 230 pending driver statuses resolved within 4 minutes. I hit the transmit button on the corrected pay file at 6:47 Sunday morning. I sat in the server room for a few minutes afterward, drinking coffee from a mug I had brought from home, listening to the familiar background noise of cooling fans and the particular rhythm of systems that were functioning correctly. On Monday morning, I walked into Gary Hollister's office. He looked like a man who had not slept since Thursday. I felt some sympathy for that. He had made a bad decision, but I did not think he had made it out of malice. He had made it because he did not understand what he did not understand, which is a very common way for powerful people to create expensive disasters. It is done, I said. All 2,200 drivers have been paid correctly. The IFTA corrections are drafted and ready to file. HOS compliance data is current and accurate for all active drivers. I will have a full written incident report on your desk by end of business today. He nodded. He started to say something and stopped. What is Tyler working on now? I asked. Gary looked at the window. I moved him to the marketing side of things for now. He is going to help with our fleet branding initiative. I left him to whatever thoughts he was having and walked down the hallway to my new office, which was the corner room on the second floor that had previously belonged to the director of technology, who had left 6 months before I did. Someone had set up a decent coffee machine on the credenza beside the desk. I appreciated that. I want to tell you something about what I found when I sat down in that chair and looked at the job posting I was about to put up for 2 junior administrator positions. I was not thinking about Tyler, and I was not thinking about Gary. I was thinking about Dennis Pruitt out of Charlotte, who had called me on Friday morning confused about a pay stub showing $63,000, and about the Birmingham driver who had been told by a broken formula that he owed his employer $1,100 for doing his job. I was thinking about the 230 drivers who had sat at rest stops and truck stops for a day and a half, waiting on a system clearance that was not coming, burning hours and losing pay they had earned. Those are the people a system like this actually serves. Not the executives, not the owner, not the VP with his son and his laptop, the drivers. They are the reason it matters that this work is done correctly, and they are the reason I am particular about who does it and how. 2 weeks after I came back, I sat in the server room with the first junior administrator I hired, a 29-year-old named Ricky Okafor, who had 3 years of experience at a smaller carrier, and the kind of methodical curiosity that good systems people always have. I was walking him through the HOS compliance architecture, showing him where the ELD integrations lived, and how the data flowed into the pay calculation engine. He had a notebook out and was writing things down with the focused attention of someone who understood that what they were learning was not just technical information, but responsibility. I made sure he knew about the Wednesday evening glitch at our Charlotte terminal, where the geofencing system occasionally double stamps departure events if a driver pulls forward and then backs up at a loading dock, and how to catch it before it contaminates HOS records. I made sure he understood the IFTA edge cases around drivers who cross a state line to fuel up before immediately returning, and how that affects our miles to gallons ratio reporting. I showed him the backup archive system, where it lived, how to access it, and why I had built it separately. I also made sure he knew what was in the documentation library I had written over the previous 14 years, and what was not in it, and why. The part that is not in any document is judgment. You build judgment by doing the work long enough to understand where it can go wrong and what it looks like when it does. There is no shortcut for that. There is no app for it. There is no platform you can build in a coding boot camp that substitutes for it. Gary's company-wide communication went out on a Tuesday. It acknowledged the payroll and compliance issues, described them as the result of an inadequate system implementation, and thanked the operations team for resolving them. It did not mention Tyler by name. I had not asked for that specifically, and I thought Gary's version was probably as much honesty as a man in his position was capable of generating, so I accepted it. The 2 junior administrators I hired were both fully onboarded by the end of the year. Ricky became my deputy. The other one, a woman named Priya, who had come to us from a regional carrier in the Midwest, specialized in the compliance side and built the most thorough IFTA audit trail documentation I had ever seen in 14 years of doing this work. Between the 3 of us, there was no longer a single point of failure. That had always been the right answer. The only reason it had taken 14 years to implement was that the people making budget decisions had never understood what they were actually risking until the day the risk materialized at exactly the worst possible moment. I still have the coffee mug on my desk. It says World's Okayest Database Administrator, which was a gift from a driver in Birmingham on his 10th anniversary with the company. He brought it by the building after he found out I had been the one to fix his pay during the crisis. He said he did not know my name before that week, but that he would not forget it now. That is the part that matters to me more than the contract or the office or the consulting fee, not the corner room, not Gary's apology, not any of it. The part that matters is that on a Monday morning, 2,000 drivers across 7 southeastern states started their trucks knowing their paychecks were right. That is what the work is for. That is why you build the backup systems nobody knows exist. That is why you spend a Saturday night in a server room with cold coffee and the sound of cooling fans, fixing something that never should have been broken in the first place. Because somewhere out there, a man named Dennis has a wife who deserves to stop calling the bank in a panic. Some jobs cannot be replaced by a newer version with a cleaner interface. Some jobs require the person who has done them long enough to know where everything is buried and why it was buried there. And sometimes, when the people who do not understand that figure it out the hard way,
they say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. But now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.